Most people don't notice places like this anymore. We almost didn't, despite living here for more than 3 decades, raising our kids here, building a life along these roads. Familiarity has a way of blurring things out. And maybe that's why it matters now, as America nears its 250th year. Something important happened here in 1776. George Washington and Benedict Arnold both passed through this ground. But at that time, none of it looked like history. My husband is a TV videographer, and I've spent years building and rethinking media companies through content, streaming, and technology. I've been leading, building, and moving fast, but sometimes slowing down matters. It's how you start to see what's really been there all along. Take the Birdsall House. It began as a home for early settlers in the 1700s. Later, it became a tavern for American soldiers. And by 1776, it was part of General Washington's Hudson Valley network. It played a quiet but pivotal role in the Revolutionary War, including the backdrop for the decision that placed Benedict Arnold in charge of West Point. We'll come back to that. First, we start in Peekskill, where Victorian homes, brick storefronts, and Gothic revival buildings still line the streets. Our first stop was at the Peekskill Museum, a preserved building that has stood through generations of change. There, surrounded by archival maps, artifacts, and records from the Revolutionary era, we sat down with historian and author John Curran. Do you think when you look at Peekskill today that it still carries a lot of that legacy, even though a lot of people don't know this full history?
No. And that's why the history is important. And that's why reading is important. And the study of your community is important. And it's not just Peekskill. Almost all these communities in Hudson Valley have some experience or evidence of at least the Revolutionary War.
And it starts with a moment in 1776.
November 10th, 1776, Washington arrives. He's on horseback. Immediately, he goes with some other officers to examine the river further north. And as he's going up and down, he says there should be a fort there, a defensive thing here, this and that, telling people what he should do. He comes back to the Birdsall House. He appoints General Heath, one of his lower officers, to be the commander because he's leaving and he has to go down to New Jersey to protect Philadelphia. And he establishes headquarters at what we call the Birdsall Family House on Main Street.
Now let that sink in. Washington. General George Washington stayed here. From this stretch of the Hudson, early plans of defense were being shaped. The Birdsall House was part of that landscape. The Birdsall family was among the early settlers, establishing a home near the Albany Post Road, an important colonial route connecting New York to the Hudson Valley interior. Tell us more about the Birdsall.
Birdsall was among the original settlers in the early 1700s. A lot of the business was in transporting things and making little things on the river. Mercantile, or they called it in those days, or something like that. He was one of those, one of the founders of the community, you'd say these days.
During the Revolutionary period, many homes in this area became a part of this broader network of military movement across the region. A major Continental Army base was positioned here from 1776 to 1782. And roughly 1,000 soldiers were stationed at Fort Hill.
I've sort of narrowed down 4 major events of the Revolution that were significant in American history. After all the fighting was over in New York City and the Battle of White Plains, the entire American army of Continental soldiers, full-time soldiers and militia came here to Peekskill. And Peekskill became the first headquarters in the Hudson Valley for the American Army. And I didn't know that. That was a big discovery. And it happened because after the Battle of White Plains, who was in charge? That was General Washington.
The Birdsall House served 3 Continental Army commanding generals from 1776 to 1778. General Washington made frequent stops here, strategizing with those top commanders, including Alexander Hamilton, Brigadier General George Clinton, and yes, Benedict Arnold. At the time, still trusted, still rising, still on the inside.
While he's here, he writes a letter to the Congress. I had no idea about any of this. I mean, I found this fairly recently in George Clinton's papers. And he's telling them exactly what he's doing, where he is, and what he's going to do next. It's like a report to the Congress in Philadelphia. As soon as he came, again, he decided where the chains were going to be to stop the British Navy, where to put a fort, where to put the gun emplacement, and in case they came up on the ships, you're going to blast them and then go this way and that way. It was brilliant. And that's one of the reasons why Washington is celebrated also. He was a brilliant commander.
The British attacked Peekskill in March 1777, destroying military supplies, buildings, and barracks. A new headquarters was needed. It was August 1780 when General Washington signed the orders placing Benedict Arnold in charge of a new West Point, a decision that would later become one of the most infamous betrayals in American history.
And it's only, again, sort of recently I realized that the Hudson Valley was the only location that was always occupied by the American forces. The different armies that came in. There was no Navy, but the Americans had no Navy. So all the battles you read about took place in New Jersey or in Pennsylvania, Virginia. They were off-site in a way. But Washington was very protective of the Hudson Valley.
By 1783, the war was over in the Hudson Valley. Some places didn't come back from it. Somehow, Peekskill did.
So you have to give the individuals credit for this, that somehow they all shared the same values and this same understanding of what needed to be done. And that really explains a lot of it.
Like many towns along the Hudson, Peekskill eventually faded over time, but the spark was still here.
Unfortunately, it's overlooked that Peekskill was the first such important position, so much so that it was, deliberately targeted for attack, and so it was sort of forgotten in that way. Because a lot of American history, unfortunately, they only focus on the success stories and they sort of ignore things where it didn't go so well. But I don't think that's the point. The point is how important was it and what happened there. Once you get into that, it helps you tie it all together.
Over the years, we've watched Peekskill shift. New energy, new restaurants, a growing art scene, small businesses returning to the streets that once felt quiet. And that change is layered in its history. Just steps from where a Revolutionary War strategy once unfolded, there's now a new Birdsall House, a modern gathering place that carries the same historic name. Across the street, a simple plaque marks the spot where the Birdsall House once stood. You'll have to look closely, though. It's obscured by construction work. What was once a wartime corridor is now part of everyday life again.
After several generations were born here, they didn't think of themselves as English or Europeans anymore. And they saw that they were new. There was something new to the world. And they were Americans. They weren't English, they weren't European.
Places like the Birdsall site don't announce themselves. In fact, they don't look like history. But as America nears 250, they're still here, built into the streets we pass every day.
So it's like putting pieces together, but it's more of a progression. It's sort of an incline that the more you learn, the more interested you get. And it's sort of like being trapped by it, in a way, your own interest in that topic and those different stories and the people involved and what happened. And then you begin to see the larger panorama of things and how things presumably in history fit together.
For more stories like this, follow us at Hudson Skies on YouTube.